Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for our DEI speaker seminar series titled When the Warrior Returns, an exploration into veteran culture and life. My name is Dr. Ramanathan, and I am one of the co-chairs of the Peace Task Force Committee. PEACE stands for Pharmacy for Equity, Acceptance, Compassion, and Excellence. Our speaker today is Mr. Mike Kim. First, thank you so much for your service. Mike Kim is a psychoanalyst, ex-monk, combat veteran, and retired U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs Vet Center Site Director, lead war trauma readjustment counselor. With more than 20,000 clinical hours in facilitating war trauma therapy, he has helped veterans, active reserve military personnel, and their families since the early 1990s. So please take it away, Mr. Mike Kim.
Thanks for having me, and I truly appreciate the introduction. I find that what we have here is looking at veterans from not just from the news, but from more of a interdisciplinary level in regards to bridging in the practical as well as the academic, and looking at the current events as far as how these permanent wars have affected soldiers and sailors, Marines, and airmen in their lives back home. So I've been really trying to, throughout my years, well before the War on Terror, before 9/11, working with Vietnam veterans back in New Haven. So that's kind of like my start. And throughout the years, I've been able to truly understand some of the struggles that are unfolding within the veteran terrain. And so today's meeting is focused on just sharing some things from my experience, and hopefully you all will benefit from it. I know this is the College of Pharmacy. My background, not just as a therapist, but also as a medical administrator for the Department of Veterans Affairs, led me to be exposed to folks from the world of pharmacy at the VA. And I always found that they were very professional, but not only that, they were really like up to date with so many different tools as well as approaches as far as reaching the vets. So if there are any students that are looking at going to the VA for the future as a career, I'd say, take a chance, see what happens. If anything, if you have any like fellowships or internships available through the VA, why not at least ask and see where that can take you. But I can guarantee that working at the VA, although it's known to have a lot of bureaucracy, it's very rewarding at the same time. And so that being said, let me just continue on with the presentation. Is the first slide seen? When the Warrior Returns?
Yes.
Okay. Let me try to expand. Okay, there we go. I got confused between share and slideshow. So this talk is going to be dealing with veteran culture. I think a lot of people are familiar with military culture in many ways through our popular culture. And if you see some of the images that I added, I'll be getting into the daily lives of veterans, studying that, examining that with you all. But there's just something about, bringing up some things that you might notice, like the Rambo movie series that really, was part of uh, the post-Vietnam years, as far as looking at how are we to integrate Vietnam veterans back into society. And that action movie was very meaningful to a lot of Vietnam veterans. And yeah, even in therapy, it would come up, the movie Rambo, even though Sylvester Stallone did not serve in the military during the Vietnam years. The movie is somewhat a message to society, as far as uh, being that isolated veteran. And that, I think, uh, all Vietnam veterans that I've come across, they can connect with Rambo in regards to the issue of alienation. So that's a theme. And about the same time that Rambo came up was uh, the song "Born in the USA," as you saw in the previous slide. Um, and so there you've got uh, this song that was used by Republicans and Democrats. It just became like a very popular pop culture song. But if you look at the lyric, if you listen to the lyrics closely, it really talks about veteran readjustment. And as a matter of fact, Bruce Springsteen spent time at not my vet center, not my VA vet center, but at one of the original VA readjustment sites in California, and was exposed to some legendary therapists. And he was able to talk to different veterans about their readjustment. So, listen closely to Born in the USA, and maybe you can get a feel of what a veteran will go through. The reason why I point these different references, and I wasn't able to go through a lot of them in the last slide, but I will on this slide, is to kind of like show that, veterans are, not only do they interpret, but they also produce um, veteran culture, or objects within veteran culture. An example of this is Born on the 4th of July. Um, that's a book written by Ronnie Kovac, who's basically paralyzed after being part of the Vietnam War. And he really wanted to share with America his struggles as a Vietnam veteran, readjusting. And I think it was this book that helped push a lot of policies and a lot of benefits and healthcare issues to light for Jimmy Carter and and the rest of the the rest of the presidents after Jimmy Carter. But it was Born on the 4th of July. That's a major book, as far as letting you know what the experience is from a disabled Vietnam veterans experience after the war. A book that touched me while I was experiencing the military was by Wallace Terry. The book is called Bloods, and it ended up being influential in the movie Dead Presidents, which is kind of like a big Generation X type movie, very popular. And that the lives of the people in that movie are in the book Bloods. Bloods was written by an African American journalist who embedded himself with troops in the Vietnam War, and it's basically oral histories of many different types of African American veterans. Whether there were officers or enlisted, you got to see some of the things that I will talk about in regards to daily life. concept that I've been developing, and that's, really kind of like engaging, who the veteran was before the war, who the veteran is during the war, or during military experience, and the veteran after military experience. Really looking on these three major shifts in a veteran's life. And so Bloods is a great book, and I believe Spike Lee just created a movie on Netflix, and it's titled, I believe, The Five Bloods, and it's again taken from some of the different narratives out of the oral histories in the book by Wallace Terry. Shifting to the Gulf War, which a lot of people don't remember, but still very important in veteran culture, and that is the Gulf War becomes the first kind of like televised live, and as the philosopher Walter Benjamin spoke about, history being like now time, that the present, trying to capture the present is just as important as the past, capturing the past. And I think it's interesting, no matter what you may be a critic or someone who supports CNN, it's interesting that during the Persian Gulf War back in 1991, we were brought to that now time. And so that's why I kind of show like the advertisement, and then I show the different commentators that were like kind of commercializing the war effort, as far as understanding the different movements from the different militaries during the Gulf War. That's Wolf Blitzer. Now, what's interesting about Wolf Blitzer, CNN wanted me to be a part of some anniversary program tied to the Iraq War. Now, the PR person that was to clear me for this was asking me questions that were just way too intimate about Iraq. I had pretty much just returned from Iraq, maybe a year or so, and to get bombarded and to expect my whole life just to be out there, it was just a challenge. Not that I felt like I needed to hide anything, but I think you'll find with a lot of vets, they're still trying to understand what really happened to them in a war, or even in military experience. So not to demonize Wolf Blitzer, but it's just something that I share with you because we can all learn from that, as far as recognizing that veterans appreciate a certain level, not all, but I would say many appreciate a certain level of privacy in regards to their military service. So, I mean, I think authenticity is something that could be helpful in that process of sharing. As we start seeing the war on terror unfold, we also, have like the cultural product of documentarians like Sebastian Junger. He did this war documentary called Restrepo, and he basically is a civilian journalist, and he's embedded, and he videotapes firefights and living with troops. It's quite interesting because when this movie came out, I think it was shown by National Geographic on cable. I had a dear friend call me, and he was saying how he felt triggered by the movie, and it really affected his readjustment. So, before I mentioned Rambo being a positive trigger for veterans, as far as Vietnam veterans, certain movies may give a negative impression. I know that my stepmother, who died of Agent Orange, she was from Vietnam. She had experienced heavy combat. And when I was younger, I didn't know all of that. And, you know, if I turned on a war movie, she'd ask me to please turn it off. And I'd get into, you know, arguments with her and everything. And, you know, as I got older, I started to understand that people process war differently. And these different cultural products that are circulating within society, they need to be examined closely, because you know, the messaging can be positive, and it can also be negative. I have a photo of a veteran. His name is Rudy Reyes, and he was one of those veterans who basically was able to not be, I should not a victim of like the media, but he created his own media persona instead of letting the media create it for him. So I would say he is like one of the first veterans to actually transcend media networks and create his own persona. And you can look him up. He was in the movie Generation Kill, and he's still doing many great projects. He started a nonprofit called Force Blue, where he was a very elite commando in the Marine Corps. And yeah, and after the Marines, he started a nonprofit that leads other veterans to scuba dive and save the coral reef, you know, and it's just like a noble cause. So this is a way that, you know, certain veterans like transcend mass media imposing their images of what a veteran is. And you know, I put this up, the New York Times. You know, sometimes when we read the news, it's important, especially now with the Ukraine, that we kind of like recognize how the news is you know, affecting us. It affects a lot of vets. When ISIS was terrorizing the Middle East, there were a lot of veterans who wanted to return to Iraq, you know, and there are many reasons why. Sebastian Junger said that it was an issue of feeling a certain sense of purpose, like being with your comrades. But I think that there were a lot of veterans triggered by ISIS and wanted to go back more from like a moral perspective, as far as, you know, they had felt, even though, you know, they may have felt that they were part of like an unjust war, that they were making a difference. And to see what was happening in regards to ISIS in the Middle East really triggered them. And so you had veterans going to the Middle East again, or having that deep desire to pursue that life as a contractor or as a volunteer. Just a quick history regarding veterans in the United States. I mean, we can go back to ancient history and find records of, you know, whether it's in the Bhagavad Gita in India, as far as understanding the warrior, you know, from you know, from that perspective, or looking at classical texts by Sun Tzu and others who spoke about war and the effects on war, on the warrior. But I'm and then the ancient Greeks, you know, with the epics, you know, great understanding of history. But I think it's important for us to understand how veteran history is tied to American history, and the image of or this painting of you know, revolutionary troops, revolutionary colonialists, you know, that actually they're not. Those are citizen soldiers who were farmers during what's called the Shays Rebellion. Actually, that's the first riot in America. People don't realize that was, when veterans, after their participation in the American Revolutionary War, were being taxed heavily. And they really stood up and set up a militia and truly had a cause to rebel. And so, Washington, George Washington, our first president, did everything he could to quell that. If it wasn't for local politicians and certain people within commerce to assist with getting that tax removed or lowering that tax, who knows how many casualties would have resulted. But the issue was resolved. But it just shows you that our country and the issue of veteran treatment is something that goes hand in hand. If you look at the metal plaques, that are, that I present, and that you can find that in Washington, D.C. at the VA headquarters. And it's interesting. Well, Abraham Lincoln was the one to really set services for veterans. He knew about the troops from the Civil War that would need help. And so it's interesting to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and for his widow and his orphan. And so it's important to recognize that our country has a history of making efforts to take care of veterans, whether it's through direct benefits or setting up public hospitals to assist veterans, whether inpatient or outpatient. These things to help veterans were in existence, in the 1800s, and people aren't aware of that. People think that the VA was just immediately started right after World War II, with Omar Bradley being the head administrator. But you find the roots going back to Abraham Lincoln and the programs his administration set up. You've got an integrated army, an integrated military after World War II. That's a major issue because sadly, the GI Bill, which was an incredible piece of legislation to help Americans right after the war, and it truly helped Americans gain a certain taste of the middle class, really helped many people. The thing about it is that there is evidence that shows that many African Americans and others who tried to tap into educational benefits through the VA or through mortgages, to get housing through the VA, through the GI Bill, that became somewhat of a challenge for them due to segregation. And so we have to recognize that while we had an integrated military, that happened before segregation in a larger part of the country. So that's a picture of Franklin Delano Roosevelt signing the GI Bill. In 1989, President George Herbert Bush, had set up the VA to have a secretary, a cabinet level official, so just like the Secretary of State, we have the Secretary of the VA now because of George Herbert Bush. And then, a lot of programs set up within the veteran community to recognize the contributions of female veterans, veterans of diverse races and ethnicities and cultures and diverse backgrounds in general. The military has done a lot throughout the years. It could definitely do more, but it definitely has been a leader in regards to promoting diversity. A lot of the original EOC trainings, and they weren't controversial, but they were part of the military. I started in the military back in 1986, and I was aware of those trainings. And I ended up, later on as an officer, I even had one of my duties as being what they call the civil rights officer. And so it's quite interesting that although the military culture is very rigid in many ways, and you do have to follow orders, there is something that's tied to due process of the law with the Constitution in regards to military culture. And I think a lot of people are not aware of it, but yeah, it is quite interesting. And feel free to ask questions as I'm going through these different slides and as I'm speaking about different topics. Okay. Here, I want to capture veteran life. You've got veterans on one side who are on Wall Street, who come back from the military and end up getting high executive positions. And then you've got homeless veterans, and I think we've seen them on the streets of America. But at the same time, this homeless shelter I visited, I believe it's moved since my last visit, but it's Borden Avenue Veteran Shelter. And what I found that to be was a very humane approach towards housing veterans. It was when I was there, it was very clean. I was able to hold certain meetings there in regards to veteran benefits and pretty much be a representative on the premises to get homeless veterans into veteran health services. And I just found that that for me is like a model that should be maybe carried out by many cities and states as far as caring for the homeless. But that's just my opinion. Part of daily life with veterans is recognizing other veterans, being in community with other veterans. And here, this is the VFW post in Queens, where you've got a World War II veteran, Mr. Moretto, and he, the VFW post is named after him. And basically they ended up switching hands to the younger veterans, in the post. And from what I hear, it was done without any charge. And it was truly an act of giving by the elder vets. And that's part of the veteran reality is finding community, not for all veterans, but definitely for certain veterans. Earlier, I mentioned female veterans. My sister is a female veteran. One female veteran I'm really impressed with. I mean, she's a veteran, I'm just saying she's a veteran, and she just had an incredible background in fighting ISIS. Her name is Asha Castleberry. She even ran for Congress. And though it was a close election, she continued to be out there in regards to using her background in international affairs. And that has led her to the State Department. And so she works with the Biden administration and she's moving up, at the State Department. So Asha Castleberry, she deserves a salute for sure. Then we have the interesting case of people, just veterans, just working regular jobs. Working. Home Depot is a place known for hiring a lot of veterans. The founder is a veteran. The thing about it is, with veterans, at times it's really difficult to let go of the culture, the military lifestyle that you've absorbed through your military time. And here we have a veteran who basically was on the job and saw someone stealing and tried to stop him. And I think he ended up getting fired because maybe he was a little bit too rough, but maybe he just, didn't let the police deal with it. But he felt like he wanted to kind of like assist in that situation. So you've got many complex situations with veterans in their daily lives. It's not that all veterans have these type of transition issues or readjustment issues. It's just that sometimes they show up in the military, and now some of the reasons why. I try not to be biased in regards to my politics, and I just try to show life worlds of different veterans, and that's a lot of like my research. But if you look at the lower image of the Oath Keepers, they were involved in the January 6th, I guess, insurrection or protest, that ended up becoming violent. The Oath Keepers, they are also a part of like the veteran community. And while you may not agree with them, it's important to know a little bit about them, just because they feel betrayed by America. They feel, the Oath Keepers feel as though this is a society that has surrendered a lot of the morals and the virtues and the lives of what it means to America. So they're kind of resistant towards changing America, if you know what I mean. And that's part of their struggle. It's important to know, because one never knows if you come across an Oath Keeper, as in Thanksgiving, you never know if you have a relative or if you have a neighbor. And I always think it's important to know than not know. Daily lives, again, you've got college students who are veterans that are not just like going to work. You've got veterans in college and also going to work and participating in the post 9/11 GI Bill. I'm sure you have students in your college, the College of Pharmacy, and I'm sure in the undergraduate college at University of North Texas, who are using the post 9/11 GI Bill to get through school. And so Queens College in New York, I don't know about the different college veteran organizations in Texas, but I would assume that there are a lot of college organizations that deal with veteran issues. And I know the director at Queens College, and that organization tries to be a bridge between the student and the university, because again, you can find community in these organizations. And I think that's the big thing that many veterans seek. You've got veterans who are public advocates, like Joe Bello in New York City, who's been doing veteran advocacy in New York since the 80s. And his thing has always been to recognize equity in the veteran terrain when it comes to local issues involving veterans. Right now, there's like a major issue with the closing down of the New York big hospitals, VA hospitals. And so Joe Bello and a couple others are involved in trying to have Mayor Eric Adams and the state influence the federal government to not shut down the Manhattan VA or the Brooklyn VA. We also have veteran entrepreneurs who are into setting up their own businesses. So Condition One with Matt DeMeo, he's been on ABC News, and there are just veterans who just don't want that 9-to-5 job, or they're not into academics, but they're highly talented in managing money and raising money and really like distributing products, especially in pandemic. And I would say Matt DeMeo is a great case study of that type of veteran. You've got a veteran that I know who's unlike my close friend Rudy Reyes, who kind of set up his whole entertainment military culture identity on, from the military perspective. You've got other veterans like Brian Dillett, who he was in movies that aren't tied to the military, like Shawshank Redemption, like The Truman Show. He's produced Soldier's Heart, a award-winning movie. He's been in many movies going back to the late 70s, and he's a Vietnam veteran. And he does a lot of creative things to keep himself motivated throughout life. And so I truly appreciate him in what he does. And then there's possibly disturbing image, I think, with Kyle Rittenhouse. But the thing that I want to point out here, as far as the daily lives of veterans, is that you have certain veterans that may back Kyle, and then you have other veterans that may not back him. So you can't just look at veterans as just like one way. You can't assume that all veterans are like oath keepers or tied to heavy use of firearms. They're veterans for peace. That's a movement that goes back to the Vietnam War, and there've been veteran movements that date back to World War I and World War II. And it's just really interesting, the diversity as far as different vets, how they live their political lives daily. And down here, you have a veteran. I want to preserve his privacy, not that he's out there in regards to public record, but he went through a very sad tragedy as far as, trying to defend himself. At least that's one narrative. He was sleeping in his car, being out at night, and he didn't want to drive drunk. And he had a firearm, and he shot someone who was trying to get into his car, to try to break into his car. This isn't an uncommon, it's not something that happens regularly, but it does happen. I know 3 other vets in that type of situation who have had to deal with law enforcement because of the death that resulted from self-defense. Sadly, his case is on appeal. This veteran's case is on appeal. But firearms are something within the veteran reality that we have to face, and we have to recognize, to have a balanced look at how they can promote wellness, or how can they be an obstacle to wellness. just as much as there's like a culture, because I'm doing this dance between culture and daily lives, going back to culture, there's also a culture with veterans in regards to veteran readjustment. And Suzanne Gordon has written a lot on veterans and the VA, and she's someone who believes that the VA should remain a public institution for healing veterans, and that it's the best care that a veteran could have, you know. And even though it has many problems, it still offers more to veterans than if they were to receive services in the private sector of healthcare. A book that just came out that is different from Suzanne Gordon's is Wounding Warriors, and that just came out recently, like in last November, December. And there's a big policy guy. He's a veteran, Daniel Gade. His position is that the VA is incompetent, ineffective, and that everything should be privatized. Now, I would say that there are aspects of the VA already privatized, you know, that it is a hybrid model right now. But I'm just questioning, you know, how are they going to manage research, and what type of bias in research and in administration is going to happen because of the private interests of corporations involved in treating veterans and their wellness. These are just questions I pose and I leave for you to ask, because you may be reading the New York Times or the Dallas newspaper, and these books may pop up, and I'm just, you know, giving information to help you make your own decision in regards to this present issue in veteran healthcare. So it's definitely part of veteran culture. These are other organizations tied to veteran healing. These are very informal type of programs. I put the USO. If you notice the USO, that started off as a place for veterans and troops to just kind of like find a safe space, you know, in society, in daily life. And that later on ended up being, you know, an entertain. The USO ended up becoming a big source for entertaining the troops, and also doing a lot of morale activities for troops. And that's great. But I'm wondering if that program, and a lot of people aren't familiar with the USO and that capacity, but it was an idea that folks from the Roosevelt administration, along with the GI Bill, kind of set up, you know, kind of influenced, you know, the USO to be at different places for veterans around the country and troops around the country. Interestingly enough, Carl Rogers, the humanist psychologist, one of the top psychologists, he was a part of promoting that. A program that I was tied to, the Vet Center, that was a program that helped set up the diagnosis of PTSD. Those people who first started the program of the Vet Center back in 1978, I believe. Now, is it 78, 77? That helped set the diagnosis for PTSD in 1979 for psychology, psychiatry, counseling, and social work. We have to recognize that this is a site that's out in the community that is supposed to be counselors and administrators without the white coat, to meet the veteran where the veteran's at. I remember when I was tied to the Vet Center way back when, 2017 is when I retired. But I remember doing home visits doing home visits in real difficult, challenging areas of Brooklyn to help out a vet and see how I could get the vet to tie himself into services. You know, vet centers also have great presence for civilians to work in. It's a split, you know, interdisciplinary type of team, clinical team from different backgrounds. And civilians are a part of it. There's a large proportion of women, folks of color in leadership positions. I was, I believe, the first Korean American vet center director, I believe. At least that's what I was told. So the vet centers are really important, and they're part of the Readjustment Counseling Act, and the vet center is called RCS, Readjustment Counseling Service. It's a great program. Another program that's very similar to the vet center, but not as big, because there's over 300, close to 400 vet centers around the country, including Hawaii, including the territories, Guam, Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands. Headstrong focuses on New York, in the tri-state area, I believe, and they work with Cornell Weill Hospital, and they're an outpatient program for veterans, and it's privately funded. A lot of veterans pursue that versus going to the VA, or will pursue both because they don't want the big hospital environment. The American Legion has been big throughout the years in regards to promoting veteran healthcare policies to help veterans, to encourage politicians to fund the VA more. The American Legion has, you know, I mean, like I said, I talk about facts. It's had its challenges in regards to segregation issues and race issues. I remember, you know, I was told to go to the Chinatown Post when I tried to join, I think that doesn't say everything about the American Legion, to be fair, because the largest American Legion post, ironically enough, is the Chinatown Post in Manhattan, and the most funded, as far as like the Chinatown Post gives more funding to the American Legion headquarters more than the American Legion Post in Dubuque, Iowa. You know, that's just like an example to show you that not just the American Legion, but the VFW and all other veteran organizations, they have to, in many ways, understand that this is a country that is changing, and in many ways, it's easier, not harder, to be open to the diversity, the different types of people, the different special populations, LGBT, trans veterans, just, you know, vets of color, just women vets, all types of vets, disabled vets. You wouldn't believe how many disabled vets that suffer within the community, within the veteran community. And, you know, as a community, veterans have to do a better job. Wounded Warrior Project, I'm sure you recognize the symbol. I thought I'd bring that up because that is part of veteran culture. They started up during the War on Terror, and were well known for raising a lot of money, but also well known for having lavish galas and kind of like not having great accountability with their money as well. So that's also part of like the veteran reality, is that we have great organizations, we have troubled organizations, and at times we have organizations that participate in nefarious activity. Now, I know Wounded Warrior has gone through an overhaul, so we'll have to see. But at least something has been done to try to correct some of those errors. IAVA, they do a lot in regards to advocating for veterans regarding healthcare, regarding benefits, regarding education. I'm still trying to figure out what their ultimate goal is. I know they do a lot of work in DC, but their offices are in New York, like on Madison Avenue. I don't know if it's still there, but much of IAVA has been dealing with personalities in Hollywood, dealing with politicians. Paul Rieckhoff, who was the founder, was a very charismatic person. And you can see him a lot, even to this day, on MSNBC with Rachel Maddow. I'm not being overly critical. I'm just pointing out that they're mostly, I guess, an awareness public nonprofit. They're, I guess, involved in veteran issue awareness. So there are many different organizations. Just do your research. Always look at their financial documents. Every nonprofit, including a veteran nonprofit, should have a financial. So I think you should review, and you should see if what you want to be funded is aligned with how these organizations are spending the money, and the financial should give you that information. Now, I'm personalizing it, in regards to my life, and I received a wonderful introduction earlier, but I'd just like to let you know that my whole family has been affected by the military and by war, whether civilian or military. My sister was in the military. She is an officer. She also works for the VA. She'll be retiring soon. There's a picture of me. I'm a nerd, even in combat. And there's a picture of my dad. I guess he is too, but yeah, my father served in the military. And my mom was, she experienced war. She's from the Dominican Republic. She's an Afro-Caribbean woman. My dad's Korean. My mom experienced the US intervention into the Dominican Republic in 1965, and really was up close with combat in regards to the bombing that occurred from the jets. And she was so affected by it that even in her death, before her death, she started to talk about it just out of the blue. And so it's really interesting that was like one of her last narratives, to explain that to the family. Why do I say all this? I personalize this presentation because I'm a researcher that uses my life to contribute to culture. What is that called? That's called autoethnography. It's a rising qualitative research approach. At first, it was a bit rebellious and not accepted by academia, but many people have started to recognize the value in autoethnography, because it's not to lower standards when you use autoethnography in regards to using research or utilizing research. It's about including the study of like oral histories and journals and documents, from that person's life. So wouldn't it be an interesting unit of data using one of my mom's diaries, as she was experiencing that moment towards her death, and writing a few things, because she did do that. She was always a writer. And it's interesting that by getting that type of information, you can add to a war narrative, as well as looking at other research sources, primary, other primary sources and secondary sources. But my mother experienced war. My stepmother, as I told you, after my mom died, my father remarried. My dad experienced combat as a civilian and as a soldier in Korea. All my grandparents experienced war, and even my son, experienced warfare. And one thing in veteran culture that I think we don't look at is the families affected by war. So I wanted to dedicate a slide to the families and share, some things, and back it up with academics. My doctoral advisor, who's done a lot in regards to researching children, even wrote an article after the war on terror started. I have that article there. You can get access to it. Dr. John Broughton out of Columbia University, he wrote an article tied to the effects of the news and how children find out about war and how they're affected by war through that. And I can say that my son definitely has gone through that journey, and we're constantly rebuilding from all of that from the past. Earlier, I spoke about, I guess, these different stages of the veteran. I like to say, much like John Keegan, who wrote a book called The Faces of Battle, where he kind of like goes into different wars and different battle experiences, and he tries to give you kind of like a certain sociology of these soldiers and commanders. So I think that can be, to a certain extent, transferred into understanding veterans, as far as you could look at their lives, but their lives are a bit different than maybe those featured in Keegan's book and some other military books. I try to, unlike certain movies and books that come out, I really try to look at things from not just like one event, like the war story. I don't try to look at that. I like to look at veterans from the perspective of what got you into the military. People don't understand, part of veteran culture is taking an oath. You take an oath to defend this country, not to defend a president, not to defend a, wealthy family like the Koch family, and not to defend entertainers, or, you're taking an oath to the people through the Constitution. And my question is to every veteran is, what was your life before you joined the military? What got you into the military? Some people join because they didn't have like a family, or their family life was real with a lot of problems, and it's an escape. But I also, when I was going through Marine boot camp, Parris Island, my neighboring, I guess, bunkmate, I don't know if it was my bunkmate, but, he had the rack. They're called racks, not bunks, racks. They're kind of like bunk beds. And he was from a very wealthy family. His father said, if you make it out of Marine boot camp, which I seriously doubt, I'll get you a Corvette. And I was like, that's a pretty good deal. He ended up graduating, and he showed me the Corvette. I was pretty jealous. I think my dad could promise me a Mattel car, those little Hot Wheels, That's okay. But you know, the civilian who enlists, the actual military service, but people don't understand. And if you're doing clinical work, this is very important. A veteran's military can be viewed in many ways, not in every way, but in many ways, through the service record book, the SRB as they call it. And that has like a very detailed narrative. It's not the DD-214, it's a detailed narrative of what you did, of where you were, of all the different trainings that you've been to. So that can also help you understand, if you're doing clinical work, to find out what a veteran's life was in the military. The veteran can also find out, and that of his own records, he can write to, if he or she went to the Army, you know, the American, I believe the American History Institute will send you the full narrative. You could look at archives. Yes, archives.gov. If you look at archives.gov, you can get those deep records. And if you want to get it for your family members that have died, I believe you can get clearance for that as well. But that's important, to look at your military record and your military service and how it fits. What were things that were left out? There's certain times, you know, an officer will write something and there's no connection to that reality, what was happening, you know. I'm not saying it happens all the time, but it does happen. Administrators, you know, who were enlisted could mess up a record. So you could have something in your record book that you don't know about. And once you find out, you know, it might be false. And you can have that corrected, just to let you know. Then you start going into, you know, leaving the military, you know, and then you have a new life. You're out of uniform. You're a civilian again. And they give you, the military gives you a DD-214, which is a short review of your military service. And you use that for applying to government jobs. You use that for different legal procedures. You know, if you're asked, were you in the military, you will show the DD-214 for legitimizing your military service. And again, sometimes the DD-214 is not fully complete. You can have that corrected as well. So I spoke about a lot of concrete things. You know, I spoke about my life. I spoke about the lives of other veterans. I spoke about, you know, the different books and movies and films and TV shows that veterans are caught up in, or they contribute to in producing. But meaning making goes even deeper, as far as like, how is life like, you know, after the military? You know, who are the people you care about? Who do you love? How are you working? How are you finding out, you know, your path for the future? You know, ironically enough, people don't realize that the first major war trauma therapist, and I'm researching him right now, believe it or not, is Sigmund Freud. And he basically said that people, you know, they've got to deal with common unhappiness, and, you know, they have to discover, you know, who do they truly love, and what type of meaningful work are they a part of. I would add to that, as far as what is the vet doing as far as service? Like, what, you know, is he just serving, or is she just serving herself? I mean, you know, it's important to look at these things, you know, serving the community. These are questions to be asked. Creativity. There's an organization by the name of Claymore Arts. and Maria Salazar. She's a gifted artist and has incredible pieces of art. And it's just amazing how she gets people together to work with clay and to create different things that are tied to civilian life or to military life. And that's part of meaning making as well. So I don't just limit to, are you going to school? You know, that's what my family was asking me after the military. Are you going to school? Are you getting a job? You know, don't mess with Susie Q at church. You know what I mean? Which I did. But anyway, the thing is that we're life has so much more than just trying to find a partner and finding a good job. My other doctoral advisor is an incredible researcher by the name of Dr. Yolanda Seeley Ruiz. And in her writings and in her talks, and even in her conversations with me, she always mentions, you know, the archaeology of the self. And I thought, gosh, that's so, why does that really hit me? It hits me because Yolanda focuses a lot on recognizing that you didn't just show up, you know, in your present reality, that there was something that got you to that present reality. And what is that? And going into the deep places of the mind and the soul and into your narrative can lead you there. So part of my veteran research involves narrative. And Dr. Ruiz has an incredible amount of background in that. She helps out a lot of educators who might find themselves in inner city experiences and might have unexamined behaviors and feelings in those different communities. Like in the Bronx, let's say you were raised in Iowa and you end up teaching in the Bronx, you know, what is that gonna, you don't have like the military to help you kind of adjust or force you to adjust to that. You're just in this environment, but how are you going to get there? Well, you could get there through having like a deeper understanding of yourself, through doing it in an archaeological dig within yourself. And I think that that's important for the veteran to look at, because for me, after Iraq, I wonder, you know, I get the concrete numbers, you know, I definitely, though I'm a qualitative researcher, I spent a lot of time as a medical administrator at the VA doing quantitative stuff. But, you know, so 8,000 deaths, you know, in Afghanistan and Iraq for this war on terror, you know, thousands of wounded and injured from that war, over $8 trillion spent on that war. And what am I left with? I'm left with really a certain sense of emptiness, because it's like, what did we go fight for? I thought it was to free Iraqis. Many people thought it was to free Iraqis and the folks from Afghanistan. So I think doing a good archaeology of the self, and then like recognizing that there's also more than the concrete understanding of war, but there's a symbolic understanding of war. And my primary doctoral advisor, John Broughton, started off doing that type of research with children. And then he started to write about how there's a symbolic meaning making with Americans during the first Persian Gulf War. And he wrote the article, and I include it, you can check it out. It's called Pleasures of the Gulf War. And basically, I take his position and I transfer that to now, to especially even dealing with what's happening in the Ukraine. You know, what's the symbolic meaning of a veteran, an Iraq war veteran or Afghanistan war veteran who ends up volunteering to go to the Ukraine? What is that type of meaning? The only way you can find that out is if you do like the deep work to understand these different meanings, you know, from your own war experience, military experience, from your childhood. That's like very important to look at. And yeah, so the article is there. And let me deal with my phone, where I've got these spam callers, I guess. I call them spam callers. But we're talking about symbolism and war and the concrete. In that symbolism, we also recognize different myths that can be reality. I don't know. Let me present something to you. I hope I don't screw this YouTube video up, but you know, maybe maybe we have a little bit of time, but I want you to see what type of myth making, what type of reality making is happening in this video.
Dr. Kim, we can't hear. Maybe if if you, when you share your screen, if you click
Okay,
on the audio share as well, then we would be able to hear.
got it, got it. Let me get back. Oh, okay. Well, you've got the link. You could check that out on your own time. Maybe you could do a little exercise and see check out like what you can do in regards to seeing whether a myth or a reality, or maybe a little bit of both, but it's important to check that out. Now, for all you people in the wonderful world of pharmacy, I thought I'd dig this article out. Please check it out, because I'm not going to spend a lot of time due to the time for this 2-hour presentation, seminar, what have you. I thought I would try to find an article that deals with PTSD from the world of pharmacy. And this medical writer, Miriam Reisman, she has done a great job, and it's a 2016 article, but approved by NIH. And it just really gives a lot of robust information on different research studies, you know, that go beyond the 2004 landmark PTSD study with the New England Journal of Medicine. I believe Charles Hogue started that study on PTSD, where it's in the research, they kind of came up with 15 to 17% of 3,000, something like 3,000 soldiers, troops, infantry, Army and Marines, 17% of those troops were diagnosed with PTSD. And after like three months after their deployment, 3 months after their deployment. Now, it did show in that study that maybe 9% of veterans who didn't, of soldiers who didn't deploy had PTSD. So that's an interesting gap. Some people say that it's a lot higher, and that was a study done in 2004. I think this article here covers newer articles that may show the issue of core morbidity and PTSD, like depression, anxiety, sleep disorder. Sleep is a major issue within veterans with PTSD. I believe, I mean, the numbers, there's just so high as far as veterans with PTSD and a diagnosis of a sleep disorder. So that also pain, dealing with pain is another comorbidity. Substance use is an issue, substance dependency. What's really interesting is that the VA has a lot of different services, inpatient and outpatient services. And what I've noticed is that although they at times have hiccups, they really do make an effort to deal with these challenges. But I think it would be best for you to check that article that I present here for you to learn more about PTSD in the veteran. Here, the most recent VA study on PTSD, I put the public health link. It's an easy read, but check that out. That will give you interesting numbers in regards to demographics regarding PTSD. Because there are so many issues to talk about within the veteran community, I know that my limitations to this presentation is that there are certain issues regarding veterans that I just don't cover, like certain health issues like traumatic brain injury, TBI. I don't go into much of the research there, but check that out. I mean, that could be very helpful to you. And other issues regarding the aging vet, specific issues, health issues tied to women, that the VA has made a lot of room for that. There's more that can be done, but yeah, that's a great thing that's happening. The use of service dogs. There's a lot of veterans now that are finding it easier to get service dogs, and it's because of the research that has service dogs as being a certain source of support, for a veteran, which is very important. I'm going to go into the Department of Veterans Affairs, the details. But before I do that, let me just say, I mentioned Miriam Reisman's article, but let me say that there are treatments, right? That I know doctors prescribe, and I know that you might be handling or might be doing research on some of these medications, right? That still the first line of treatment is medication that it is SSRI, either Zoloft or Paxil, and that's supposed to be joined with psychotherapy. And the two therapies that are most popular that the VA endorses, there's actually three. There's CPT, cognitive processing therapy. A lot of people connect that with cognitive behavioral therapy. That's like a very much a managing of thoughts and feelings, and you know, 10 sessions to process different things tied to traumatic events. And then there's also exposure therapy, where you're placed in different environments, or you're given different exercises to kind of like journey with a therapist and go into those dark waters with a therapist and being exposed. Let's say I'm a therapist and I'm working with a veteran, and they have problems with dealing with crowds. Well, an exercise for a veteran would be, well, how about if we, you know, have you walk into Walmart, you know, when it's not so busy, and let's just see like what happens. And you know, if you feel unsafe, you know, you can immediately walk away. But how about we do that, and let's write about it. Let's process that in therapy. But that's part of like an exposure therapy exercise. EMDR, eye movement. I always get this wrong. Desensitization. What's the R? Reprocessing. That's basically the use of taps, or I thought that was my ex-wife. Anyway, the use of taps, or moving of the eyes through a tool that kind of has you move your eyes back and forth. But basically, it's much more complicated than that. But that has also been recognized as therapy. There's like non-traditional therapies involving psychodynamic short-term therapy. I believe Bethesda Naval Hospital used that for veterans for military troops who were not finding it productive to be in CPT or in EMDR or in exposure therapy. So this psychodynamic therapy, short-term psychodynamic therapy, was very helpful for these veterans, because they're able to kind of like process different things in their lives. Again, what I mentioned before, and I am a psychoanalyst, so I'm familiar with psychodynamic therapy. Your pre-military life, your military life, and your post-military life, and what are the different meanings behind them, and what are the different resistances in your daily life that you go through, right? Like, let's say you're a veteran who does not want to leave the house. You know, what's that disorder? Is it agoraphobia, I believe? And you just stay isolated in your home. You have many veterans that way. And in the psychodynamic military type of therapy, you would be examining different things from your youth that may have, what was your first experience, which you really didn't have tools as a youth to deal with. You probably didn't have enough tools to deal with that issue when you were in the military. And then surely after the military, you're kind of like in fragments mentally. And so this deficiency is when I say deficiency, not in the veteran, but like in the deficiency as far as the experience, right, of being not integrated, but like being able to kind of like accept these issues of isolation, you know, being more open as far as not being so isolated. the psychodynamic therapy can be also useful for intrusive thinking. I spoke about PTSD, and so when you're dealing with PTSD, you're dealing with re-experiencing of an outside stressor, an extreme stressor like combat or military sexual trauma, or hurricanes, or even doing humanitarian care missions. Those type of events, they affect the mind and the body. And then, you have that experience that you re-experience it in dreams, in intrusive thoughts, in flashbacks. Very powerful. And then you go into avoidance mode. That's the other layer of the diagnosis of PTSD. Avoidance. You go into avoidance behavior. Like I said, treating your apartment like a bunker, or your home. Oh, did I just say too much? Oh, well, I go out a lot. Anyway, avoidance. And then being irritable, that's also another layer. Irritability is another layer. And that's a layer that has to be understood, the hypervigilance and everything. Hyper alertness. That's part of PTSD as well. And then, hello?
I'm sorry, this is Janika. I'm sorry to interrupt. I was trying to charge my laptop. That's why you can't see my picture anymore. Do we have time to answer some questions real quick?
Oh, you could answer questions as I go. I'm almost complete. I'm supposed to finish at around 6 o'clock, or another hour. 30 minutes. So.
Okay. Should we go ahead and ask some questions now from the chat group?
Yeah, that's fine. Can I finish this slide real quick?
Oh yeah, that's fine.
I only have two more slides. Why don't I just power through that, and then we can get into the questions.
Okay, great.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
So thank you. And so looking at irritability, and then some type of decline in functioning with family and with work and school. These are major indicators of PTSD. You may be familiar with the diagnosis, but I just wanted to share that with you. And there's also, issues of depression with war trauma, and military personnel who didn't go to war but may experience many different challenges in their military service. This isn't just for war vets. The VA is divided up in VHA, in case you ever have to deal with the VA. And that deals with the health, the hospitals, the VBA, that's when you're dealing with benefits, the GI Bill and compensation for claims. And then the third part of the VA that people don't realize is burial, veteran burial, and how you administer that with people who are dying, who are veterans. I think right now the biggest challenge that the VA has is this question of whether it's going to remain private or public. We see this shutdown in these new VAs, and I wonder where it's headed. For the future, I don't want to end in a negative note. There's all kinds of great organizations that are out there. I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in Texas, but the organizations that I talk about are throughout the country. You have Vet Hack, and they focus on helping vets with different prosthesis issues, wounded vets that have those kind of issues. They do a lot of funding. They do a lot of different activities with veterans, as far as having like a ruck march. They have a lot of gatherings. They build community. I mean, it's important to recognize that community is one answer to help with veterans. As you receive help as a veteran for your wellness and mental health and physical health, communal health is important. Force Blue, that's the organization that Rudy Reyes is a part of, that I was telling you. He gets a bunch of commandos and goes diving to go save the environment. Claymore Vets, Maria Salazar, doing great work in art and veterans. Condition One, they hire veterans to do all kinds of interesting work, you know. Black Veterans for Social Justice, they're an old organization in the community in New York. I think they're also nationwide. They help a lot of veterans on so many levels. I've seen wonderful work that they've done. I love their office building in Brooklyn. A Soldier's Heart, they are from Kentucky, and they are a bunch of really cool cats that just invite anyone to go out and enjoy rafting and camping out in the woods and music. Jeremy Wallace is a part of that. Camp Brown Bear, also in Kentucky, Navy SEAL. Brown is his last name. I believe it's Jeff Brown. Yeah, he's pretty, very humble man. He bought a camp and has just dedicated it to veterans, and it's free. And, you know, women go to it to process things, to have their own retreats, you know, without men, but just like to deal with a lot of different things. There's a lot of privacy and anonymity for different vets. Beyond Tribute is an organization that is by Paul Schneeberger, and yeah, he does like a lot of great work, reminding society during all the veteran holidays about what the contributions of soldiers and veterans are to our society. And lastly, Aloha Farms in Hawaii. They on Big Island in the Puna section. I spent 40 days, you know, meditating there, doing spearfishing, free diving, just doing a lot of stuff, you know. And they're just incredible people at Aloha Farms. Check them out. Check all of these organizations out and other ones. But the bottom line is this, as I close up, what do you think can be helpful for better lives in regards to veteran reality? And what are certain cultural products that I haven't, or artifacts, or you know, objects of culture that I haven't mentioned that could be useful as far as understanding veterans? Let me know. Contact me. You can find my information. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Mike Kim Veteran. You could look me up. And that's it. So I'm open to questions. Hello?
Okay, I have a couple of questions here. The first one is the best place to donate for financial support.
Financial support for veterans, is that
Correct.
What the question? Yeah. So I think earlier when I said to check out those different organizations that I posted up, I'm not saying to choose one or the other, but look at their financials. Every solid nonprofit should have, veteran nonprofit should have financial statements, and just look at their first page and then look at their budget and see if they're really dedicated to veterans and give to that organization.
Okay, great. The second question is, how does our individual narratives have an effect on post-traumatic growth?
Well, our individual narratives, whether they're written or spoken or embedded in different artistic, creative expressions in music, the opera of Danny Chen. I don't know if you know him. He's a Chinese American veteran who died of hazing in Afghanistan, in many ways for, I believe, for being an Asian American vet. You know, that's a narrative that still lives, even though he's dead. Danny still lives. And you know, for us who are veterans or even civilians, we have our own stories. And I would say it's important to understand those stories from, you know, if you're a veteran, from that standpoint of what is your life before the military, what is it like during the military, and what is it like after the military, and be sensitive to the particular issues. I know when I was at the vet center, you know, we would engage that before we got into therapy, and I would have veterans also write about it, you know, and they could take that, you know, that little piece with them all throughout their therapy and with their families, you know, because to be quite honest, your artwork and therapy and hanging out at the VFW or doing some of these community events for veterans, those are kind of like real, but at the same time limited, right? It's for example, my son, who, you know, if I'm integrated in, not adapted, I'm integrated. I have that, if I absorb my narrative and I'm invested in my narrative and I can share my narrative constructively with my son without re-traumatizing him, I think it could be a benefit. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. And I see that Charles Warner has their hand up. Is there a question you'd like to ask, Charles?
Yes, hello. Hopefully it's okay to do the video and just do audio question.
Totally cool.
Hi, great talk. Thank you very much. Hello from, or good evening from Sarajevo. I'm in Bosnia right now working with combat veterans in former Yugoslavia.
Yes.
I'm a social anthropologist and a doctoral researcher. And the reason why I mentioned that is it kind of frames contextualizes the question I wanted to put to you. You touched on a lot of different points that are very near and dear to my own research, but you mentioned some of the kind of domestic networks that have formed between veterans associations and organizations. And you know, you're kind of tying things together from different cities and states. And I wanted to kind of ask if you've come across any kind of transnational relationships or connections that have stood out in your research or in your work. And alternately, is kind of maybe an easier out for that question, is how might that kind of benefit in a reciprocal way both veterans overseas, you know, veterans who are Bosnian or Croatian, as well as American veterans. Thank you again. Great talk. A lot of great material. So it was very expansive. I appreciate that.
I want to connect with you. So just look me up or I'll look you up. I definitely am interested in that international type of bonding in regards to exploring communalizing, as Jonathan Shea, right, who wrote, and you know, he's controversial, but hey, he's a MacArthur fellow, right? Jonathan Shea, who wrote Achilles in Vietnam and Odysseus at War, or did I get that titles?
Yeah.
I don't know, my mind, you know, I'm always
it's Achilles, yeah.
Yeah. So he said, you know, and I think in one of the books he mentions what's crucial. I think within veteran work, I've done it, you know, with civilians as well. Communalizing the pain. That's why group work is so powerful. And I, you know, though I find at times Robert J. Lifton a bit outdated. I mean, the vet centers were started, you know, Lifton he had started the vet centers. Now in veteran culture, I'm caught up right now with veteran language semantics, because I think that we have to try to find a way not to dehumanize people groups of people in therapy by using the excuse of therapy. You know, like talking in group therapy or in private therapy and mentioning the word, for example, you know, I can say it because I've been trying to fight this for a long time. I'm Asian and I'm treating Vietnam veterans, and they're calling me, they're not necessarily calling me chink, but it's happened before, but it's mentioned in the group in regards to, you know, dealing with the Vietnam War. And is there a way to kind of help people understand the power of language, you know, even if you are in therapy and you're allowed to say what you can say, can that norm be kind of like altered to be more life-giving and less tied to that death drive, as Freud was talking about, because that's destructive. That type of language is just destructive. And I don't think it really improves someone from getting better. All that being said, I think I got lost in the question, is that moving towards these other organizations and groups abroad is so important to me, because making comparisons about treatment is you know, it's something to learn about. Like when I did the Harvard refugee program in trauma, you know, it was great because I was able to understand why the VA was focusing a lot on physical health concerns, right? Like at HPRT, they were talking a lot about, hey, you know, I went to this, I was treating someone in Cambodia and, you know, they got butt stroked by an AK-47 and I can't do therapy, you know, war trauma therapy with someone that has that. I got the person to medical care. This is the person who did the presentation, the case study. And I was like, that makes total sense. You can't talk to someone really about therapy unless a lot of their major health issues are being dealt with, you know? And I wouldn't have gotten that if I didn't do this program, which was overseas. It was, I guess, in the Italian Ministry of Health, and folks from all around the world. And so, you know, the things that you do are part of that. There's stuff that I'll not understand about combat trauma, even with my 20,000 hours, that I could pick up from you. And why shouldn't that happen? Why can't we have delegations? As a matter of fact, I think that encourages what Lifton spoke about as far as using politics for positive change in regards to trauma healing. Doesn't necessarily mean, you know, going to attend a protest, but it's doing this type of work that we're doing right now, talking about engaging people, because we don't know if tomorrow you're going to be my enemy or I'm going to be your enemy. Sadly, that's how the human condition is like. But I think by having this type of exchange, it becomes less prone towards violence, more towards understanding, and more towards peace.
Thank you very much. I have several follow-ups and we could probably keep going quite a bit longer, but I don't want to monopolize the time. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, if we've got still enough time, come back on.
Okay,
Thanks.
so there's one other question in the chat. It is, how would you handle a veteran with many years of experience, rank, and military status who struggles being a novice student?
A therapist who is a former military person, or is a military?
No, it's a former military person that's a new student who's struggling.
A new student in the classroom, as far as college, graduate school, or doing clinical work?
Glenn, are you here to clarify?
Sure. Dr. Kim, the question really is about the transition from a very significant military career to becoming a novice graduate student. So I think it's particularly important for whether it's a pharmacy student, a medical student, whatever kind of student it is. We actively recruit veterans to be members of our class. And many times they are different than their peers in the class. different in many ways, but in one way is a long history of status, experience, camaraderie, esprit de corps that maybe isn't the same as in civilian life and in a civilian education setting as they are traditionally more comfortable with in the military setting. So how do you approach those students so that they feel included, that things don't go off the rails, so to speak?
Yeah, that's a great question, and man, I'm just like, I love these questions, you know, that Wagner before and yourself, and I think it's important to look at the actual veteran has to see why they're in the program, right? Just like, right, like I'm assuming you're military too. You sound like you're military.
That's correct. I'm a veteran myself.
Okay, so you know this, right? Like guys that like you know, through confessions here, you know, I was in Marine Anglico. That's a jump unit when I was very young. Pretty elite unit, you know, up there with recon, no doubt, you know, especially back then in the 80s. I, you know, I made it. It's on my DD 214. You know, they sent me to jump school. I really loved the camaraderie, but I got hurt on a jump, and I just didn't see I was going to be much of a benefit, you know, and I was able to get a transfer, but I had to face that, you know, and I think that if the veteran in the academic environment is passionate about what they are doing, for example, people will tell you, you know, I haven't got my doctorate, so I love it when all you call me a doctor, you know, but I've published a lot, I've done a lot of different things. You know, much of it has to do with my delay was, you know, I left the program to take care of my son and then to come back to it after retirement. I should be done soon, but like, you know, I've been in the program for ages, in and out, you know, and I'm just very passionate about it. And I carry a lot of struggles, you know, I have health issues, all kinds of other issues tied to readjustment. And like I said, I bring something like what you said, I bring something to the university, to the classroom, to my classmates. But I know I'm not always up to par. I know there are students like me too that may not be always up to par in regards to that type of university setting standard, because we're not used to that by and large. And I just think you've got to question one has to question their passion. You know, you should be in academic programs that you can manage, that are enjoyable, much like what I said earlier, you know, what Freud said about, you know, hey, you know, if it's a common unhappiness, recognize it, you know, drive on, you know, you got to get through it. But if it's just something that you are just not into, the student is not into, or is having like a lot of problems that are just unmanageable, maybe that student needs to take a break. They need to find mentors, you know, like there's all kinds of mentor programs out there. I think Veterati, you know, a lot of schools now have like veteran support mentorship programs at times. You'll see that. But I think mentoring is like really important, just like in the military, right? When you're just green and you need someone, you know, you need like a compassionate NCO to kind of like, you know, help you out along the way. NCO is a non-commissioned officer, kind of, you know, someone who's like a manager in the concrete military life and battlefield. So So I would say mentorship, seeking mentorship is important on many different levels. I would say questioning your level of passion towards your studies, and then finding, a plan B. If academic life is not for you, plan B. The other thing is look at what the VA and other groups can offer through vocational rehab, the reasonable accommodations. Each school has an office of disability, and you can not have shame in putting in different requests for reasonable accommodations so that you can, be successful with your schoolwork. But there's many ways that you can work in the university to get things done to find success. And I don't see people who have trouble in academics with veteran background. I don't think that's like a failure or anything. I just feel as though some people are guided to other things. Other people may need a break, right? You could take breaks. Look at me. I took a break. I started my program in 2011. I published a lot of different articles. I've done like a lot of different like research projects, and I took like a 5-year break, and I was asked to come back, and it was great. I never had like any, I had some challenges, but I always had great grades. But I recognized my military readjustment played a factor in some of the things, my isolation, where I didn't want to go to class. I didn't want to go to these different things. So it's important to also take charge of your mental health and wellness, and be in touch with, like a vet center, in case you're afraid of like your security clearance. You could go to organizations that are helping veterans that are, that preserve your anonymity. But there's nothing wrong with going through therapy while you're like going through your studies and everything like that. It actually could be one of the few times when you're going to have the opportunity to do it. I don't know if that's helpful, but I really appreciate that question.
Oh, thank you for your insight. Much appreciated.
Do we have any other questions?
I noticed something in the chat. I've had classmates that were veterans in pharmacy school. They were definitely more disciplined, and they made the best leaders because of their life experiences. Yeah, I agree. That's the thing with the veteran. You got to take the veteran for the good and the bad. I mean, there are a lot of veterans that may be annoying, but if you try to understand the veteran, that could be very helpful. And that's why I hope this was helpful, to describe certain things. I thought, by having it very interdisciplinary, concrete, and also praxis oriented with a touch of academics, I thought that would be much better than me reading off what's the rank structure in the Army, what's the uniform of the day for the Marines, and talk about the chain of command and all of that kind of stuff. I just thought that's part of military culture, but I think it doesn't really go into the human terrain of veteran life, So I appreciate that comment that you made about veterans. And Jean Wu says lots of veteran groups and resources on campus. Usually they are, and they're tied to the MBA program. Yeah, there's a lot of, I was taking a course, when I was doing coursework, at the business school, because for some reason I couldn't take my stats course, in my program. So, and I noticed there were a bunch of like military people in the business courses, and they had a community. They communalized their experience. Is really interesting. How would you handle a veteran with many years of experience. Okay, we went through that. Thanks, Glenn. Does Gordon talk about the VA services to women veterans? You will find information regarding women service, services for women in the general VA website. If you Google women program, women services with the VA, and they have a whole section. And I wish I spent more time on that. But yeah, there's just like a lot of awareness growing. There needs to be more, but for the wellness of women, it's like important, no doubt. The military is changing, the veteran terrain is changing. There's like 15% of the military is female. People don't understand that. That's a huge growth within the last, I don't know, 10 years or so. 15% of the military, like women, that's a huge growth. And the military has to adapt to that. And the veteran terrain out here and the VA has to adapt to that.
Being what I should train out when I get back.
I'm trying to find. I talked to a woman who was in the Marine Corps who said they shot a gun once, but most of their training in those days was hair, makeup, and comportment. Let me just tell you right now, and I know some of my peers watching this video, and by the way, I'm wearing my jump wings, but I should be wearing my Eagle Globe and Anchor for the Marine Corps. But the thing is that Ranger school, there are women going through the Ranger course. That's like a hurt locker of a course. That's a tough course, and women are making it. I don't care what the media is saying. There are women that are making it. Are there dropouts? There's male dropouts, but there are women making it through the course. And you can't say, oh, they made the course easier, because that's a peer-reviewed course, and certain skill sets you've got to know. Everybody, there are people who get by these type of courses, but by and large, there are women making it through the Ranger School course. So military has changed, and they also fight. My sister was career military. As far as one joke that is said is that my mouth was so big in the military that my sister outranked me. So that just shows you how things have really changed in the military. So tell me when I have to go, because I could stay here forever. I really love this discourse. Most veterans are molded by TV and Hollywood images. Yep. And that's why I started off by presenting all those images. I didn't want to just talk about these different programs without you guys being connected to the popular culture that talks about trauma, that talks about people of color in the military. I didn't want to do a briefing. I wanted to show you through, our popular culture in many ways. I'm currently conducting, I think I'll do one more, huh?
In the interest of time, I think we'll go ahead and close the session. If you guys have any further questions for Mr. Kim, please feel free to reach out to him. You can Google him online. He's actually quite popular. Again, thank you, Mr. Kim, for your time today. It was a very enlightening talk, and I will definitely go home and listen to Born in the USA when I get home, because I haven't heard it in a really, really long time. And I've never seen a Rambo movie, so I will definitely look into that as well. And I've learned about Restrepo, so I'll look into that as well. But I wanted to thank you for your service. All of us are very thankful for your talk today. And for those who are students, I would highly recommend looking into doing a rotation or that type of thing in the Veterans Affairs, so that you can get to learn about veteran culture and life a little bit more. I did my infectious diseases training at the Dallas VA, and I
wow.
really enjoyed it that year, so I would highly recommend it. And again, thank you, Mr. Kim, for your time today.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank
Thank
you
you
very
so
much.
much.
Thanks for having